Welcome to camp. I'm really happy that you decided to join our stream. As you know, we stream all of our events during the coronavirus pandemic restrictions. Today we have a special guest. Today we will talk with Carlo Ratti, a famous Italian architect, designer, educator and director of MIT SENSEable City Lab. He was mentioned in many respected magazines like Forbes, Fast Company or Wired. In his projects he works with big data and incredible simulations, and I hope we will talk about them someday or maybe today. Let's see. Carlo, welcome to camp. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. And it's great to be with all of you. And by the way, apologies, I know we had to start a few minutes before, but we've been trying to fix a problem with Zoom. There's a new virus around called Zoomonia, and today it hit my computer. So somehow, we couldn't connect via Zoom. We had to end up on the Hangout, and it took a bit of time to set up. So thanks everybody at the organization and technical people for sorting this out.
Yeah, we have so many viruses around here these days. So thank you for joining us, and I will ask you for a presentation. We are looking for it.
Yeah, so what I will do is, I understand we started a bit late. First of all, also, I wish really this was in person in Prague, but as you know, things are being a bit difficult these days. I actually was in the US in lockdown until a couple of days ago, and now managed to fly to Europe, which was quite an adventure. It took me like 48 hours to go from Boston to Europe because there's so few flights and connections. You need to wait so long for a connection in the airport. So I'm doing my quarantine. So the reason you're seeing me here next to the sea is that I'm quarantining for a couple of weeks because of following the law. But it's not a bad place to quarantine. It's in Liguria, in the north of Italy. Now, I put together a presentation with a few slides. I'll just, maybe because we started a bit late, just show you a couple of things. I prefer then to have a discussion with all of you, but just a couple of thoughts. So the first one is about how what we are living is changing our approach to design. And I like this sentence, this phrase. It's a phrase by a guy called Rahm Emanuel. For those of you who haven't met him, bumped into his name, Rahm Emanuel was the mayor of Chicago, the former mayor of Chicago. And before that, he was Barack Obama's right-hand man at the White House. And actually he said this around 2009 with the previous crisis. A crisis is a time when everything changes around ourselves. And we kind of need to reinvent ourselves. So a crisis is usually a time when we need to be super creative in order to respond to quickly changing conditions. And I was asked today to present one project in particular. I'll go very briefly through it. It's a project called CURA, which was our response to the pandemic. We put together our team. Our team is in Boston, New York, Turin, London, and Singapore. And when the pandemic struck, we had a big Zoom call all together, and we said, what can we do? How can we help with the situation? And we started thinking about, how COVID has changed the way we work. If you think about the many open source projects, this is about MIT project about open source ventilators. Actually, even big industries like Medtronic, are working on with open source in their code. And by the way, I saw that my battery is about to die, which is very weird. So we might get disconnected. But then, we try to say, can we work in open source? And we develop a design in open source. You can find it on curapod.org. I'm going very quickly, but basically, how to turn containers. I don't particularly like containers, but containers are very easy to put in negative pressure, so the virus doesn't go out, and you can easily do a prefabricated intensive care unit. So anyway, we started with this. The beauty of open source is that people can replicate it. The community grew to around 1,000 people. These were the initial drawings. I'm going very fast. You can also very quickly change the inside and configure this on the outside in different configurations. If you need a self-standing hospital, an extension, a bigger or smaller one. And just in 4 or 5 weeks, we managed to get one installed. This was thanks to a UniCredit, a big European bank. The sponsor, which is actually being used now, is helping to save lives in northern Italy. But the most, and this is the inside, but the most amazing thing is actually that people in different countries started cloning this. And you see here many people around the world in UAE, in Italy, in Canada, in other parts of the world that started manufacturing this. This is actually in Qatar, and we're just getting every day more people that are using the drawing. So the point I want to say is that the virus is kind of code, and that code is attacking us. Now, can we actually provide other code, the code of design, this type of code that helps to design something different in order to respond to the virus? And in open source allows us to move much faster and do fast scaling up. So that's the first thing I wanted to share with all of you. Just you know, as a first thought, and I was asked to talk about this. I want to tell you another quick story, and then maybe I'll move to a place where I can get power. If not, we'll get disconnected. But the story is about this guy. And all of you who studied architecture know this guy, who's Luis Barragan. You can recognize him also from the beautiful stairs in Calle Ramirez in Mexico City. And, well, Luis Barragan has an interesting story. He worked until over 50, designing a lot of stuff in Mexico City that's not particularly great. And then, you know, one day in his diary, he wrote the following: "I'm sick of listening to clients talking about their tastes. I'm quitting with all my clients. From now on, I'm going to work for one client only, myself." And then he did it, and he only did since then, after that, you know, in the second part of his life, he just did a handful buildings. His own building the buildings at El Pedregal in Mexico City, Casa Gilardi, which is close to his building in Calle Ramirez, and a convent, and a couple of other things. And with those, he actually won the Pritzker Prize. Now, somehow, you know, the point was that when he became his own client, he had the freedom, he could really express himself. But there's a but. He had to work all life in order to, you know, and by the way, I start to move to a place where I can connect the computer. So bear with me while I keep talking. And so he had to work all of his life to make enough money, then to be able to gain the freedom. Now, what I would like to say is that today, many of you, and especially people who are graduating today, can actually have the luxury of being like Barragan. And be able to, probably it's me. The luxury of being like Barragan, because of the way our network society work and how we can actually use the network in order to, quote, find our clients. And I want to say this especially for all the people who are graduating now. If some of them are listening to us, you know, we're seeing this with all the students at MIT who most likely are not going to get internships and other positions over the summer because of the crisis. And, you know, how really we can think in a different way. Start from a dream first and then kind of use the network in order to raise the funds, in order to make the dream a reality. And I want to tell you a little story about this. This happened to us now 3 or 4 times, but I'll tell you the last one. This was a project we did at the World Expo in Milan in 2015. We'll not tell you too much about it. The boxes were given to us, but inside we did a project called Future Food District or Future Supermarket. It got very good reviews, was very popular at the World Expo in Milan. Now actually is one of the reasons we are working on pavilions at the World Expo in Dubai, which has been postponed to next year. But the box was given to us, and we had to do something outside. And the expo wanted us to put like a giant programmable screen, and we didn't like it. We thought it was a waste of money, and we thought that we were already spending too much time in front of screens in our lives. And so what we decided was, you know, can we actually find another way to display information? We wanted, for some reason, I will not tell you too much in detail, we wanted to actually start from people's faces, from the visitors of Expo, from the world coming to Expo. And so we started collecting this, analyzing this, and somehow plotting this on this facade with this kind of giant robotic arm. This actually became the world's biggest plotter ever made. It was ended up in the world's Guinness record. And so we did this and turned the facade into like a moving canvas, you know, thanks to paint, thanks to something we've done since probably 30, 40,000 years, you know, when our ancestors were turning caves into places where we're doing drawings onto caves. There's a beautiful documentary by Werner Herzog, the great German filmmaker, which is about the cave Chauvet, the Chauvet caves in France over 30,000 years ago. The most beautiful paintings from the time that were recently found. So anyway, so we did this, and it also became, you know, quite popular at the expo. It was a way to change the space in a very simple way, not waste too much money, not use too much money, but don't use many pixels. Use another way to display information. And I will not show the video, you'll find it online, but we had also a small version in our office, and this was like a vertical plotter. They could actually write and erase, and everybody loved it. Visitors would come to our offices in the US or in Italy and look at this and, you know, and be curious. Some of them would send like this kind of simplified selfies on the wall done by the plotter, would draw and then erase. And so like a little over a year ago, we had a team in the office who wanted to turn this into a product. And we said, well, you know, we already had a bunch of startups that had come out of our work, and you know, they needed quite a lot of attention. So I wasn't so keen, but basically we decided, we made a bet and we decided, okay, let's put it on Kickstarter. If this gets, I believe, 150,000, we'll go ahead. If we get less than 150,000, then we will discontinue. Well, we put it on Kickstarter. There's a video. I will not show you. The surprise with this became last year one of the biggest ever Kickstarter campaigns. You know, one of the top 100 or something. This was not the last value. I think the last number was closer to $3 million. And then so we had to basically start producing. Start producing meant, you know, create a factory. You can see here the factory that we had to put together in a kind of 6 to 12 months. But this is one of the main producers, one of the top producers of super nice cast aluminum. And, you know, the process looks out of the Middle Ages, but actually this guy does the most sophisticated aluminum pieces in the world. He's one of the suppliers of the company. And then all the elements are, you know, cleaned and get to the factory. At the factory, there's, you know, there's a team assembling. A lot of digital production, but, you know, a lot of production also still works. You know, the industry 4.0 is still a combination of robots and humans working together. Here you see the mounting of the Privet. By the way, I forgot to mention the name. It's called Privet. And here you see it mounted and ready to be shipped. You see the little red dot also won a number of design prizes, including the Red Dot Award this year. And here you see all the tests also by the team on the paint, on different type of materials. You know, when you do all of this, you know, it's not easy to do it so fast. Usually industry has longer. Here's the team, by the way, all the team. And, you know, so doing this so quickly was quite a challenge. At the beginning as well, you know, when you do it on Kickstarter, clearly you don't have all the time to debug. So the first version had a few bugs, and now little by little they've been fixed. So it's getting better and better and working better and better. You can change, you know, it's a bit like a Tesla. You know that every time Tesla changes the software, then the thing goes faster or has better acceleration. You use that to reprogram the hardware and, you know, just keep on doing updates. And, you know, and now there's actually a big campaign. And if any of you listening are interested in providing content, you know, do reach out to the team. They have a series called Originals. Here you see one original done by a tattoo artist from Brooklyn in the United States. She's actually Ariana Grande's tattoo artist. She started developing content to basically tattoo your wall. Here you see Olafur Eliasson. Olafur Eliasson is a friend, is an amazing artist. We've been working with him quite a lot. You might know Olafur. There's a great exhibition there was a great exhibition last year at Tate Modern in London. But here you see an original content he's done, so you can have an original Olafur Eliasson interactive drawing in your house, which is based on his initiative called Little Sun. As well, because sun is so important to us, you can actually see everyday changes, like a piece of art that follows the sun and tracks it through the day. And then because this is done in different time zones, it becomes like a giant crowdsourced mosaic. And so many others. So if you just go on Instagram, you will see a lot of people every hour posting some of the things they do. You know, some of them very beautiful, some of them a bit more childish. So they're using this to put it on the wall. And by the way, this I like. It came out last week. Is about, you know, how to help in the quarantine, and actually there's a bunch of content that is just being released, which is called mazes and sudokus on your wall. All of these also done by actually the #1 sudoku, the winner of the world champion in sudoku and other people. developing original content for turning your house and your wall into something interactive, but without adding more pixels to our lives. I believe we already have too many pixels, but still we want interactivity and content and data. And so how can we find more calm more calm ways to bring data into our homes, into our lives? Some of you might know Mark Weiser. Mike Weiser was at Xerox PARC, was a great computer scientist, and he's a guy actually who coined the term ubiquitous computing, and he was dreaming of this idea of calm technologies. Calm, when computing is everywhere, it can go back to the physical space, which is a space we enjoy as human beings, and so that's what he called the era of calm technologies. Well, I want to show you these two projects very briefly, more to talk about methodology. So the first one, Cura, is about how can we use open source design in order to address a crisis? How can we scale up much faster if we need to respond to a changing condition? And, never waste a crisis in that sense. And in this case, this other thing that's mostly aimed at a lot of people who just graduated or out of school, and a lot of people unfortunately out of job because of the crisis. Think about Barragan, but there's something Barragan. He didn't have the luxury to do. He had to make his own money before being free. Now you can actually be free early. You can start in a different way. Not go to a client and try to convince a client about a project you want to do, or follow the client and have a struggle, like Barragan was saying, but do the opposite. Dream first and clients later. And so again, it's a different methodology that everybody can benefit, especially at time of crisis like today. So having said this, these were two things I wanted to put on the table. Again, I know that we have a bit of time now to discuss, not too much, but I'd be very happy to, first to interact with all of you, and to have a bit of conversation, and then to follow up. Hopefully, there can be other opportunities. Very happy to have a follow up where we can spend more time together. Again, today we started a bit later. Unfortunately, I need to jump off at 7:45 European time in 10 minutes.
Thank you for your presentation, Carlo. It was interesting. I'm really happy that you touched this actual topic. It's really important for us, for all of us. I would like to ask you about the Cura, about these containers. Do you think this is the stuff, this is the tool that cities would need in the future to have stored somewhere for another example of, or another pandemic?
It's a very good question. Actually, there have been conversations more than with cities. I don't think you want to do it at a city level, but I think what would be very good is actually have this more like a global response system, response infrastructure. Think something that is almost like under the jurisdiction of the World Health Organization. And then in the case of a crisis, like what happened in China, then the world can react quickly. So you can, or something like what happened in Ebola. You have almost like the beauty of containers is that the infrastructure to move them is super tested and quick. Probably something each of us ate today. It was most likely go to your table via a container somewhere. So I think that's a beautiful infrastructure for moving things around. Imagine that you can have a response not necessarily at the city level, but more as a global coordinator level. And another good things from this crisis is that I hope. Not sure if this will happen in the United States with the current president, but I hope in many other parts of the world, we will actually see the virus bringing countries together, understanding we're all in this together. It's almost like, it's almost like a rehearsal for what we need to do for climate change. And so to act together. So again, having a response which is coordinated in the future could be another step in this direction.
That's very interesting. So the word global, because we have seen that many countries didn't have any supplies to, I talk about masks, respirators, etc. They did not have them ready, and they had to buy them from China, from United States, etc. Do you think that we should be ready as a one world, be ready for one pandemic, and react in a way we need right now? I mean, that there is a pandemic in China, for example, so we will send our supplies to China to stop the pandemic?
Well, I think, if you look at the long term, I think the best response is to be prepared in a way that is more flexible. So, for instance, I think that the initiative by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation about creating more vaccine capacity is a better way to be prepared for a wide variety of things. For instance, Cura was designed specifically to address intensive care units for COVID-19. But if you want to be prepared globally, it's more about having a way to respond quickly, to develop a vaccine faster. But certainly it's about creating an infrastructure that can help us, yes, to respond to crises in a better way, in a better and more coordinated way.
Yeah. As I mentioned before we start, you work with data, big data, and simulations. And to be able to simulate something, we have to share our information. We have to be smart. How we can simulate or predict anything in a global measure if we won't have data from I don't know, more closed countries like North Korea, etc. Is it possible to predict or simulate something like that? I mean, global pandemic?
Well, I didn't show much work about data, but yes, if you're interested, if anybody's interested listening to us to look at what we do with data, you can look at senseable.mit.edu. It's our lab's website. You can see a lot of the projects there. We've done a lot of big data in cities that actually led to many projects and developments. Just tell you something, an interesting project we did a few years ago, then showed that in New York you can share taxis, can share a lot of trips together, and that led to a big collaboration with Uber. And as you know, Uber Pool offers now, since a few years, this ability to match people up into the same ride. So I think that was an example of how big data, in this case big data at the city level, shared by Mike Bloomberg when he was mayor of New York now a few years ago, can actually be used in order to transform and think about new services in the city. Now, you make a good point that we don't have yet platforms at a global level are a bit more difficult. We certainly have less data from some countries. If you're interested, because you mentioned North Korea, if you're interested, there's a project that was done by Wong Yoon-sok, who's a South Korean guy who is now studying at MIT. He's been in our lab for a number of years. He's now studying his PhD. And Wong Yoon did a very interesting project called Cartographers of North Korea, looking at how to get actual information also from places where you wouldn't normally think that it would be. For instance, this is people using open mapping platforms in North Korea, and he used that in order to better understand the country. So you're right, that data is not uniformly distributed, but at the same time, data has been growing so much that we are getting to the point we are creating a one-on-one copy of the physical world. When we started working with data a little over 10 years ago, data was so sparse. Think about cell phone data. We would get 20 data points. We did the first project ever that looked at what now has become common, for instance, also with the pandemic, the idea of looking at people's movements in the cities. And the first time that was done, in order to have a discussion about that, was at the Venice Biennale in 2006. Now, so 14 years ago almost, we had a big pavilion where we were showing this, and we were showing all the data captured in real time through cell phone data. Well, at the time, every cell phone would collect 15, 20 data points per day, between 10 and 20, based on some parameters. Today, if you got a smartphone in your pocket, well, that smartphone probably collects thousands of data points about your life with a precision that's really just a few feet. So somehow, the amount of data is becoming so large that then is capturing many more dimensions about the world, and I think that's also going to equalize different countries, going back to your question.
Yeah. I have another two keywords. First is density, and another one is sharing. You can read anywhere that dense city is better for us. It's more, from the point of economic, and from sharing infrastructure is better, sharing transportation is better for us, it's more ecologic, etc., etc. But now we are in a situation that we have some social distancing. We don't want to share things, we don't want to live together, we can't. How these things can live together? Pandemics risk and sharing and density?
It's a very good question. Now, I believe that we will have kind of two we need to look at two kind of temporal time frames. So there's the first one, which is if we look at the next, I don't know, 6, 12, 18 months, certainly it's going to be much more difficult to share stuff. And, I think people are expecting also that international travel will not resume very fast. As I mentioned, I just came from the United States. It was a nightmare. It's like airline says this was like how it was in the 1950s, but it's certainly not what it was like 3 months ago, totally different. So this is in a transition phase, and I think in transition phase, sharing might suffer. At the same time, if you take the long view, cities have seen a lot of pandemics, much worse pandemics than the one we are in today. Think about the city of Venice. In the 14th century, Venice lost 60% of its population because of the Black Death. And, still, despite that, for centuries, we kept on living and adoring its narrow streets called Campi and Calle, its theaters. We keep on, being packed next to each other in the theaters. And that was in the 14th century, but, then Venice suffered many other pandemics. And I think, some of you might have seen a beautiful movie called Death in Venice, based on Thomas Mann's book by the same title. That was also a cholera. It was a little over 100 years ago. It was a cholera in Venice, another epidemic at the time. So, and cities always recover. So somehow, if you take the long view, I don't think that this is going to destroy cities at all. Cities are very resilient, but it's going to change many things. And for instance, so I am not too concerned about the sharing economy. Might suffer in the meanwhile. In the long term, I think we'll go back to sharing. It's a very human thing. The digital platforms just accelerate. But I think other things might change. And let me share just one. I think I need to jump off in a minute. But just one, which is about office spaces. Well, not good news for many of us who are in the space of design or architecture. I think a lot of companies will downsize their offices. I don't think they will go Twitter route. Twitter decided that, Twitter announced a few days ago that office work for them is dead, that people can work from home indefinitely, forever. I don't think that's a route. I think we'll see in physical spaces, but that we might downsize quite a bit. And if we downsize, it means, we need much less real estate, which is, probably not good news for architects, but probably good news for the planet. We can be much more efficient in the way we use our resources, but, we might have really an excess of office real estate in cities. And again, the good news, maybe we'll be able to convert it into residential and make cities a bit more affordable, especially for younger people or less a bit disadvantaged communities, making them more affordable, for a broader spectrum part of the population. But certainly, that's going to change a lot the world of design. And so I think, that I'm more concerned or interested about some changes than the temporary changes. Yes, sharing economy, as you said, might suffer in the middle, but I think that, I don't see it in the long term. I see in the long term, we'll still want to share and be close to each other in cities.
Well, let me ask a last question. Do you think that artificial intelligence will help us in the future with these problems?
Yeah, totally. Well, artificial intelligence doesn't exist without data. It needs data to do something. And certainly can help us for a bunch of things. It's very powerful. We're using a lot of AI at our lab. I cannot mention this in detail, but you can find a lot of projects on the website, and certainly yes. But again, artificial intelligence needs to be tackled with the problem of data, and the problem of data today is a problem because also there's an issue about ownership. Who owns the data? How is it going to be used? Is it going to be used in our interest or against us, to force us to buy something we don't want or to vote for somebody we don't like? And unfortunately, that's often the case, right? Data. So I think the question of data is very important, but data is the basis for then artificial intelligence, making sense of data and using it, hopefully, for a better world.
Great.
Now, it was a great conversation. I hope we'll be able to continue it at some other time, either in person. By the way, I had to go to Prague. There's another startup that came out of our design office called Maker Shaker and installed a robotic bar at I think it's called Karlovy Lane, or it's supposed to be the largest club in Prague. And I was meaning to go and see it before the pandemic hit. So I hope I'll be able to go back when travel will resume and see you in person again with another conversation. And also next time, I will not have this kind of 3-month-long hair that's a result of the quarantine I had in the US and the quarantine I'm doing now in Italy.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. It was an honor for me to talk to you, and I hope we will see each other sometimes in person in Prague. Great.
Thank you very much, and yes, looking forward. And I love your city, by the way.
Great.
And thanks to everybody who connected.
Great. Thank you. So for our audience, this was Carlo Ratti, Italian architect and designer, and he joined us for last episode of Urban Talks. You will find the record on our YouTube or Vimeo. So have a good night.